Back in the mix with the players, Douzable, Bryant, McFadden here to break this one down, fellas. It was anything but a normal ball game, especially on the San Francisco side. So let's start right there. Brock Purdy knocked out of this game early, B-Mac, after what appeared to be an elbow injury. We're going to get more information, and obviously, in the hours, weeks, days to come here. But San Francisco's ability to stay in this game momentarily after the Purdy injury told you what about the fight of this team and the eventual struggle?
They have a lot of grit. We understood coming into this ball game how outstanding the 49ers defense has been. And they had to really carry the load, to say the least, for the first half. And eventually that snowball became too big for them. And we saw exactly what happened when we saw some offensive production taking place with the Philadelphia Eagles. But in totality, you know, I say this all the time. If you don't have a quarterback, the field feels like it's 150 yards. What we saw today, it wasn't 150 for the San Francisco 49ers without Brock Purdy. It was actually 200 or 300 because they had no shot when Mr. Purdy left this ball game. And it just, you know, the Eagles, they took advantage of the opportunity.
Yeah.
They took advantage of the opportunity.
Yeah, B-Mac and Moose, it wasn't just Brock Purdy going down. The backup quarterback goes down, Josh Johnson. And for the love of God, offensive coordinators, stop blocking edge defenders with tight ends. We saw that's what happened with Hassan Reddick. This is a defensive line that had 75 sacks going into this game. They are getting up the field every single time. So all that misdirection, trying to block with tight ends, it doesn't work with this defensive line. B-Mac talked about it, right? Without a quarterback with the ability to throw the football, I mean, the game plan changes totally. How many times can you run end arounds with Deebo Samuels or even run Wildcat with Christian McCaffrey? And then besides the quarterback position, self-inflicted wounds. That second drive by the Eagles when they scored, 3 penalties on the defensive side by the 49ers defense. I believe that drive went over 13 plays and it was aided by those penalties. So at the end of the game, the 49ers had 11 penalties. The Eagles only had 4. It's hard to win a game when you have that much discrepancy in the penalty area.
Yeah, it was a season that started with Trey Lance, the assumed future of the franchise at quarterback, and ends here with a myriad of different players taking a snap in the NFC title game. I sort of want to go down that road here on the 49ers because it was anything but a linear route to this moment, Deuce. For them to overcome the attrition that they did they just seem like they ran out of bullets here on this given Sunday?
Yeah, there's only so much you can overcome and overdo, right? You're on your 4th quarterback, and then your 4th quarterback gets hurt. Now Josh Johnson's in the game. There's only so much you can overcome. Your defense, you know, kept you in that game for that first half. But then again, I talked about it, the penalties. It's hard to overcome that when you're already down to your 4th quarterback and you're getting penalties and aiding the Eagles into getting into, you know, red zone opportunities and being able to score. So if you're the San Francisco 49ers, I mean, I don't know what it is. Is it just bad luck? Going back to 2017, when I was there, they just can't seem to keep guys healthy. I mean, we saw Jimmy Garoppolo go down. Trey Lance was supposed to be the quarterback in the beginning of the year. Brock Purdy is undefeated as a quarterback coming in. And then early in the first quarter, he goes down. Josh Johnson comes in. He actually makes a couple good completions, and then he gets hurt. So it's like there was just too much to overcome. If you're the San Francisco 49ers, they tried to fight as good as possible to stay in this game. But when you have that many injuries at the quarterback position, the key position on the field, it's just hard to overcome.
And the bad thing about this situation for the San Francisco 49ers guys is that they were able to get to this point with their 3rd-string quarterback, who was the last pick in last year's draft.
Not supposed to work that way.
It's not supposed to work that way at all. So when you talk about the talent, they have an abundance of talent on this roster. Unfortunately for them, the injury bug bit them at the wrong time. Because I felt like even, you know, the first drive or so, it seemed like this would be an evenly matched ball game. And then when Brock Purdy went out, they still had a fighting chance.
Correct. Talking 7-7 at a point in that game.
Yeah, for the majority of the first half, and then and Dudes talked about the penalties that led to the touchdowns.
Right.
But this is a team, when you talk about everything they had to go through, all the adversity. As Deebo missed like 4 ball games.
Yep.
You know, Kittle came into the season not healthy. For them to get to this moment, this has been an unexpected year when you talk about what they were able to achieve. But today, the injury bug bit at the wrong time.
I do want to get to the future for the 49ers here, but in a moment, because we have to give credit where credit is due. Anytime you're hoisting that George Halas Trophy, NFC champions, there's a reason for that, and the Eagles are doing that. 13-1 start to the season, and sometimes you peak too soon, guys. That's not the case here when we're talking about this Philadelphia Eagles team. Mac, sort of total 30,000-foot look here at the Eagles. How have they been able to maintain the standard of play no matter what's been thrown at them this season?
Focus, dialed in. not listening to the elevator music that's outside of the building. Because when you look at their hot start, surprised everyone, right? And then they continue to ride that start throughout the entirety of the season, to say the least. The only thing that hampered them was an injury to their star quarterback. I believe that if he was healthy the entire season, they probably would have won the 2 ball games.
Right.
They lost. So when you talk about how have they been able to sustain this level of play, dialed in, and it starts with the quarterback. Jalen Hurts is probably one of the more focused, dialed in players in the National Football League, not to mention he's still in his young years. So when you look at the leadership, he's been able to provide that organization, not just through actions, but also verbally, and they follow his footsteps. This has been a dialed in team throughout the entire year. And one thing I'd like to say that kind of pointed me to that direction, they had a Sunday ball game. I forgot who they played against, but the next game was a Thursday, short week. They had to travel. You remember the video of them on the bike, recovery bike?
Right after the game.
Right after the ball game, after a 1 p.m. kickoff, 4:30, 5 o'clock. Guys still had their uniforms on the recovery bike, trying to get their legs back for that Thursday night game that was coming up. That when I saw that, I'm like, oh, they got something big on their mind.
No question. And to me, that goes into leadership. You talk about some of the vets on this team. Lane Johnson, Jason Kelce. Also, the D tackle Fletcher Cox. These guys have been there before. So you talk about those guys being on those bikes. Some of those leaders got those guys together and like, yo, we're trying to do something special here. This is a short week. Let's get this recovery going early. I think it also comes down to the Eagles. People talk about they haven't been battle tested, but they have. You talked about that Thursday night, the Houston Texans game. Yeah. Nobody thought that game was going to be close. It came down to the wire. The Indianapolis Colts game literally came down to the last play of the game. So the way that this team has been able to win games in multitudes of ways, whether it's Jalen Hurts throwing for 300, or like today where we saw he didn't throw for that many yards, but they were able to run the ball in spurts effectively. We saw the week before, they ran for over 200 yards versus the New York Giants. So I think this is why this team is so dangerous, because when one thing is taken away from them, they can beat you in other avenues, right? Jalen Hurts doesn't have to go out there and throw for 300 each and every week. They have one of the best rushing offenses, but then when you try to stack that box, and they got those one-on-one opportunities now, Hurts missed a few of those a day, but for majority of the season, he's been one of the best quarterbacks on throws 20 yards down the field or greater. So this Eagles team has been well tested as they get ready for the Super Bowl. Again, they weren't tested today because of the injuries to the 49ers, but they can beat you in a multitude of ways.
I know you guys have heard coaches bark it. Maybe you've even barked it yourself at the scout team. Get us a look. Yeah. You always want to look in practice to get ready for what's ahead of you. I'm not sure the Eagles got a great look here from the 49ers. You win any way you can, Deuce, but does the means by which they won this game and maybe the lack of tests they got here from the offense specifically out of the 49ers give you any pause moving forward?
I don't think it gives you that much pause because of what I talked about already, Moose. They've been kind of tested throughout the season, and every game hasn't been a blowout for them. Now, again, you take the wins how they come. Now, it's not their fault that the quarterbacks on the other side got hurt. You find a way to win the game in advance, and that's what the Eagles have done each and every game this year. They've just found a way to win different ways, whether it's running the ball, whether it's throwing the ball. So if you're the Eagles, you don't really worry about not being tested. Now, I do worry about Jalen Hurts and some of his accurate throws this past week versus the San Francisco 49ers.
Missed a long
Missed a couple open ones, and then also, talked about those throws 20 yards down the field. He'd hit those all year long. Sailed a couple of those, was inaccurate. I mean, Travarius Ward, you got to give him credit. He played a heck of a game at corner as well. So whether he plays the Bengals or they end up playing the Chiefs, those teams play a lot of tight man coverage. He's going to have to hit some of those throws, whoever he plays in the Super Bowl, or it could be a long day for the Philadelphia Eagles.
I'm right there with you in regards to concerns with the Eagles, and I might be nitpicking just a little bit, but just the rhythm seems to be a bit off with Jalen Hurts. You know what I mean? If you go back to the final regular season game against the Giants, the rhythm wasn't there like we witnessed the entire season. If you go back to last week's ball game against the Giants, the rhythm wasn't there again, and we witnessed that once again. So that has been a consistent theme in regards to Jalen Hurts when you talk about what we witnessed throughout the entirety of the season when he was healthy. Now, hopefully they have a week of prep getting ready for the big game, and he can establish that rhythm that we witnessed throughout the entire season. But outside of that, one thing I know about postseason play, running games and defenses travel. They will show up, they will emerge, and that has been the calling card for them offensively because of the lack of rhythm with the passing game, running the football with many different backs. You talk about Sanders, you talk about Gainwell, you got Scott, you got all three guys can coexist and be extremely successful and productive in their offense. And then defensively, my goodness, Numbers don't lie. They had 70 sacks at the end of the season. They had 5 last week. Those numbers, they're not lying to you. They're true. They can rush the passer against any offensive line. And Hassan Reddick, wow, he's underpaid. Actually, they got him at a bargain based on what we've seen from him the entire season. But they got so many guys on the defensive side that can cause havoc.
Those are the two aspects of the Philly game that maybe punch you in the face physically, metaphorically. What's the underappreciated part of this Philadelphia team right now? Maybe the thing that we haven't highlighted, that we're not talking about, that has helped them, find this moment here and head to a Super Bowl Sunday.
For me, the most underrated thing in regards to this team has nothing to do with the on-the-field play. It has all to do with the front office decisions and how he rose.
Great offseason.
Think about this team. Think about where this team was last year. Think about all the moves he was able to make, doing the unthinkable for such a long time. The issue with Philly was the inability to get a proven wide receiver. They tried to do that through the draft, missed on a few players. Last year, you cashed in on a guy in Devontae Smith, but you know what? You wasn't done. You wasn't satisfied. He wanted to go out and go get a proven number 1 guy that can be the Batman at any given time. And that guy has been A.J. Brown. You look at some of the other drafted players, Miles Sanders, Jalen Hurts, Goddard, so many outstanding players. Dickerson, the offensive line. Lane Johnson. Look at all these players. Look at this roster and how they assembled this roster. A nice job by Howie and his team. And I felt like, coming into the year, guys, this was the most talented team on paper. But what they proved to all of us, that talent that we witnessed on paper, they displayed week in and week out on the football field.
I like where you went with that, B-Mac, and I'm going to piggyback off of that and say it's the secondary, right? If you look at Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, and to your point, they brought him in on a trade, right? And this dude would have been a Pro Bowler if he didn't get hurt earlier in the season. Was leading the league in interception. And they have one of the best duos at corner now. James Bradbury doesn't say much. Got him from the Giants as a free agent, and we know Big Play Say is one of the best corners in the league. So we talk about that pass rush, 75 sacks. Well, to be able to get to the quarterback, rush and coverage have to work together. They've been balling in that secondary, especially ever since they added Chauncey Gardner-Johnson to that back half. So to me, I think that's one of the most underappreciated pieces of this Eagles, because all you hear about is the offensive line, defensive line, but that secondary plays some good football.
The Birds have been flying high all season long, and they're flying to Glendale for Super Bowl 57. Before we go here, guys, let's put a final bow on the season that was for the San Francisco 49ers, because it began again with conversations in camp about who would be the starting quarterback for this team, Jimmy Garoppolo or Trey Lance. Those are going to be the same questions asked of this front office, of these head coaches, of this entire franchise this whole offseason. So I'll ask you guys right now, Bryant, McFadden, who's the starting quarterback? Who's QB1 on the depth chart heading into camp next year for the 49ers?
QB1 should be Brock Purdy.
Okay.
Right? Competition, I'm okay with that in Trey Lance being able to compete with Brock. But Brock did a phenomenal job coming into a situation where clearly his back was against the wall. He answered every question that came to him on the football field. And I believe if he's healthy in this ball game, who knows? You know what I mean? I'm not saying that the 49ers would have won this ball game, but I can tell you this much, it would have been a closer match than what we saw today. So I think Brock Purdy should be the starting quarterback, but I'm okay seeing these guys duke it out throughout minicamp, throughout training camp, leading into the regular season.
Yeah, B-Mac, I agree. I think Brock Purdy has earned it right now. I don't think because he gets hurt in this last game in the NFC Championship game that he shouldn't be the starter coming in. Let's not forget, they went undefeated with Brock Purdy at the quarterback position. This guy was the last pick in the draft. He was not expected to play. He played really well. Sometimes when the defense didn't show up, let's not forget that Las Vegas Raiders game, right? They had to put up 30-plus points to win that game because the defense wasn't playing up to the standard. To B-Mac's point, right, I know you traded a boatload in the farm to get Trey Lance in the first round, but I think a healthy competition would be good. There's also rumors that Tom Brady, he's from the area. He could potentially want to go and play for the 49ers, but I believe Brock Purdy is the future for the 49ers.
Whether it's Mr. Irrelevant or pick 199, it's going to be another fun offseason as there is plenty of talent there in San Francisco. Guys, great work as always. Taking a look now at some numbers coming out of this one, as it was a very, very dominant performance by the Philadelphia Eagles. Back to the Super Bowl they go for the first time since 2017. Philly, should we do it? The statue stands. Maybe a reason for another here in 2022.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.